I'm Edwina Beard. I'm the chair of Precinct 569, and I want to thank you for your interest and enthusiasm. I also want to especially thank the candidates for taking time in their busy campaign schedules to be here to introduce themselves and to answer your questions. We're lucky that we have all our local Democratic candidates here today. I can't thank Flora enough for her invaluable assistance in setting up this webinar, because I'm a complete neophyte when it comes to social media. So thank you, Flora, and thank you for the work that my block captains have done in rounding up email addresses for Democrats in the precinct so we could invite you to this forum. And thanks to Anna for helping with this project. Flora is also going to be the timekeeper for this question and answer period. Let me explain the format and ground rules. We'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate in the following order. Julie Brenning, our candidate for New Mexico House District 31. Wendy Schwingendorf, our candidate for Bernalillo County Commission District 4. And the Democratic candidates for New Mexico Senate District 20 in alphabetical order: Martin Hickey, Idalia Lechuga Tena, Nancy Savage, and Rebecca Stair. After opening statements, the candidates will answer questions submitted either in advance or by attendees who are using the Zoom chat option. If you want to send a question via chat, please send it to Anna so that she can collect and organize the questions. The first answer to each question will alternate in order among the candidates unless the question is directed to one individual. Answers may be up to 2 minutes long, and should an answer from one candidate require a response from another, that response will be limited to 1 minute. Flora will provide 15-second and stop warnings using visual aids. We will plan to start wrapping up at 4:45 with each candidate in the reverse of the earlier order, being given another 2 minutes for a closing statement. Thank you all for taking part in this forum. We hope that most of our attendees have already ordered absentee ballots and will be ready and eager to cast your votes when this forum is finished. So without further ado, let me introduce Julie Brenning for her opening statement.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Brenning, and I'm running for House District 31, which is the far northeast heights of Albuquerque. My kids and I love to go hiking, and we especially love to go up in the foothills and go hiking up on the trails. And one day we were up hiking, this was a few months ago, and we got pretty far up, and I allowed my 2 oldest kiddos to go far up into a hill, which allowed me a breather to turn around and see beautiful New Mexico and beautiful Albuquerque. And in my mind, I thought about my vision for New Mexico. I thought about happy families. I thought about safe families and individuals, a place where we can play and go to work safe. I thought of a booming economy. I thought of a clean environment. While I was having this vision of what I believe New Mexico is and can continue to become, I heard my little boy say, Mom, what is this thing? It's orange. So I turned around, my husband and I, and we looked up, and my 2 littles, who are ages, 5 and 7, had gotten pretty far up into the hill. And I looked up and I saw that they had found a tent up in the foothills, and it was orange. And, you know, we realized that it belonged to probably a homeless individual. So in the middle of my vision, there's also the tents of New Mexico. We have challenges. We have homelessness. We have public safety issues. We need to improve our education. But I truly believe that we can take these orange tents and use them to our advantage, and our weaknesses can become our strengths in this state. And I believe I'm the right person to lead. I'm a policy researcher, I am a small business owner, and I'm a mother of 3 children. And I truly believe I'm the right person at this right time to lead and to make these changes for New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Wendy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Schwingendorf, and I am running for the Bernalillo County Commission District 4 position. Our family's been going through some really interesting times lately. About a year ago, my fiance got the call that he was going to be a recipient of a double lung transplant, and we've been waiting a really long time for it. When we got to Denver, we had to move to Denver for a few months, and when we got back home, we were talking, and this running for office has been a vision of mine for quite some time. And I asked him, I said, well, you know, now that you have new lungs, literally we have a new life. We can go and do a lot of the things that we've been talking about, like Julie said, go hiking up in the mountains or go fishing, enjoying our time. And he told me, Wendy, you know, you've been here for me this entire process of saving my life. Now it's time for me to be here for you. So when I think about running for office and when I think about representing District 4 and Bernalillo County as a whole, that's really what I think about. This community has been so good to me. I grew up here. I went to Albuquerque Public Schools. I'm a fourth generation Southwesterner, and my family came to New Mexico because of public service. My father was in the Navy. My grandpa was in the Air Force, and my mom and dad actually met at Kirtland. So I cannot be more New Mexico than almost being conceived on the Air Force base. So I'm looking forward to getting to talk to everybody today, hearing your questions and concerns, hearing the things that are important to you. I'm just really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, now our Senate candidates, starting with Martin.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming out. If you look out the window, it's a pretty incredible day. So impressive that you were able to get the folks to be here, because it's a sure nice day to be out. But you know, it's a little bit of a somber day too. I started my career on the Navajo reservation for 7 years, and it is a tragedy what is happening out there. And it's not any finger pointing. The Navajo greet each other with a very soft handshake. And I mean, to not do so is an insult. And so they don't quite understand the social distancing that we do. Plus, if you've ever been inside a hogan, it's a one room, and there can be 13 people who live inside that. So I just want to remember them. They're being flown to Albuquerque now, which is great. But as well as a beautiful day, it's a little bit of a somber day. And also, while we're kind of, you know, in that area of COVID, yesterday, I don't know if any of you were out, I have never seen so many cars as yesterday. I don't know what's going on. And this was right after the governor's press conference, who said, you know, on the 15th, we can start doing some curbside, what have you. But it also reminds me that we aren't done with this, and we have a long way to go. And while I was going to run before this came along, being a physician, I think, is going to help me to help us to get to a new future. So, you know, part of what we're going to talk about today is what comes next. And I believe what comes next is chaos, opportunity, but fresh thinking. I think all of us here will bring fresh thinking to the legislature for change, for social justice, for everyone, for community service, and for one state. So I'm just very pleased to have the opportunity to discuss the questions with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, Adalia, you're up.
Thank you. So my name's Idalia. I am the only Idalia in politics in the whole state of New Mexico. That's easy to remember. First and foremost, I want to speak briefly about the coronavirus pandemic. I just want you to know that I'm here to help in any way. You can call me, text me anytime on my cell, 505-550-3868. I would give you my card if I could, but here's my virtual card. I want to introduce myself briefly. I was the first naturalized woman from Mexico to serve in the New Mexico House of Representatives in the history of our great state. I represented Albuquerque's District 21. which sits partly in this Senate District 20, which I am running in. I'm a very proud immigrant who holds dual citizenship. I was raised here in Albuquerque. I'm a product of our public schools, graduated from the University of New Mexico with international studies in Mexico, Spain, and France. I'm a small business owner. I'm a homeowner here in Senate District 20, and I'm fluent in 4 of the many languages that are spoken in our district, and that's French, Italian, English, and Spanish, which, by the way, as I was door knocking back in the good days where we could door knock without pandemics, I would speak 4 languages in one day, just door knocking, meeting all the people and realizing how diverse this district really is. I want to tell you real quick why I'm running. You know, when I served in the House of Representatives, I fought for higher pay for our teachers, better health care for the needy, more job creation, work to fix our crime crisis. You know, I'm a proud Democrat who's pro-business, for unions, and for our working families. I just want to continue to fight for our teachers, better health care for our families, fight to make prescription drugs affordable for our seniors, you know, more job creation, and realize New Mexico's renewable energy potential. The greatest honor of my working life was to serve you. So now my greatest hope is to earn that honor from you one more time. I invite you to join my campaign in Working for Change. And I look forward to hearing from you and listening to your concerns. I want my voice, your voice, to be my voice. I want your advice. I want your guidance. And I offer the experience, the progress, the change, and the diversity that we need in the New Mexico legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much, in particular, Edwina and Flora and Anna and all the participants, as well as the attendees here in this forum. I grew up in Las Cruces, and I had 3 rowdy brothers, and so I had to keep up with them. So I was pretty much of a tomboy. We, as a family, we camped, we hiked, we fished. I've even hunted all across this state. And I'm committed to protecting our lands and our natural resources. This is one of the major reasons I'm running for State Senate District 20. We're facing a climate catastrophe, and we must address it. And that includes not just global warming, but also on our lands, overgrazing, lack of water, things like endangered species. We have, I think it's 116 endangered or threatened species here in New Mexico. So these are our treasures that belong to all of us. Now, because of the coronavirus, now more than ever, we need to help small businesses because they're the backbone of our economy. And we've got to increase the assistance that we provide them, working together in terms of the city, the county, and the state working together so that we can provide the help that they need to stay in business. And also, we have to do this in a time of severe budget crunch. Again, I'm an educator. I want to continue increasing education funding. And I want to increase the number of women in the state Senate. There's 78% men, and us women are over 50%. So I want to have more women in the Senate. And so I want to work for everybody, you in District 20, as well as people all over the state, so we can improve the life for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Wonderful. I am so excited to be here, and I'm so excited that all of you are here. I think we're at 50 some. I don't know about you all, but I'm getting a lot of screen fatigue these days. So I'm so grateful that you're choosing to spend time participating in our democracy. And at a really uncertain time right now, COVID, as you know, is giving New Mexico a 1-2 punch of all this health and illness and suffering going on, and also our economic devastation that's starting to happen and will continue for a while. And one of the reasons I'm really fierce about running for office is I want to help us in this time to be humble and wise and learn the lessons that COVID has to offer, so that we don't just go exactly back to normal, but that we have the courage to make some improvements in some areas and go forward to something better. And I think I have the perfect background for that. So I have an unusual background to be a state senator, and I think a perfect one. I come from the movies where I'm a location manager. So for the last 15 years, I've worked in every county and every economic sector in our state, finding where movies got filmed, and then, this is the important part, doing all the negotiating to make that happen. So I have 15 years experience collaborating with churches, schools, Asaki associations, businesses, hospitals, factories, I think all of our tribes, police forces, firefighters, our spaceport, you name it, if it exists in New Mexico, I've probably done business with them. And so that's given me this broad, deep, and rich understanding of our state and how it all fits together and how it connects, and how, for example, lack of broadband can affect a student's ability to go to school, which all of us are discovering right now. And I had to do that in a pressure cooker of a situation where I had to come in on time and on budget, where failure is not an option. So I'm hoping to use those skills that help us over the 15 years of creatively crafting win-win solutions to represent you in the Roundhouse and to get us through and past and forward out of this situation we find ourselves in.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. All right, so now we'll start asking questions that have been submitted. Most of them are directed to all of you. There are a couple that are directed just to Wendy, but I'll tell you that when I ask the question. And so again, if you could answer them, first of all, in the order that you just did for your opening statements. So Julie, if you'd take the first answer to this question, that'd be great. So what are the biggest challenges you will face if you're elected to the position for which you're running?
Thank you for the question. That's a very broad question. I think the initial challenge that we're going to face as a state is making sure that our economy gets back on its feet. Now, I'm a small business owner, and so I understand, and I've actually personally felt the effects of COVID. So I have a plan to make sure that we get ourselves back on our feet. The first is making sure that we invest in innovation and entrepreneurship, and targeting high school students especially, to make sure that they are ready and tech ready, and that they can get into the schools that they need to for vocational and tech. And I've worked with the high school students right here in Albuquerque for community schools. Now, the second step is to make sure that we support our small and local businesses. And I would support tax breaks for the small and local businesses. And I want to support a diversification of our economy. So that's, I think, step number one and challenge number one. And of course, number two is public safety, making sure that we continue to have everything that we need. And I have a very comprehensive plan. My background is actually in security and peace of nations and communities. And I do evidence-based research on policy, particularly on peace. And I think that public safety is essential, that we get to the roots of the problem, which is empowering families and the security of women. And that is my specialty. And when we can take care of some of these problems and empower women and families, I know from evidence that our crime rates will go down. I also want to work on, of course, enforcement, more law enforcement, and paying them more. I want to make sure that the courts have all the resources that they need. And I also want to do intervention, which is supporting behavioral health and making sure that guns are off the streets, and making sure that poverty goes down. So I would say those are the top two challenges that we face that are the most immediate and that we need to address head on. And I believe I'm the right person to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you so much for the question. I really appreciate it. The interesting thing about there's of course differences between our state representatives and state senators that are speaking with you today. In terms of a county commissioner, the challenges are the same, but the approaches are different, right? So, yeah, I really believe that this public health and economic crisis has really laid bare some of the challenges that our community is facing, and it's really making it public for everyone to really see and understand. So as we work towards this recovery, we're going to need to be able to implement some really sound fiscal policies and incentivize responsible growth. So I want to be able to use low or no cost tactics, such as retaining high bond ratings and ensuring departments are working collaboratively under the budget. County departments have a plan that they're supposed to be following. So we really want to make sure that that's happening and adjusted as needed. I also want to be able to use IRBs and other economic development tools to support local businesses and also to bring in businesses, but most importantly, businesses that practice social responsibility and businesses that provide employees an improved quality of life. I also want to be sure to reevaluate the county's planning, zoning, and economic development policies and make sure that the things that we need are really reflected in the budget. Most importantly, I want to be able to work on strategic partnerships. I've already been in collaboration and communication with a lot of our current elected officials, and I believe that the county cannot do this alone. The state cannot do this alone. We all need to be able to work closely together to ensure that there's not redundancies in programs and that we're using our money and our resources to the best of abilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin?
Thank you. I think we've already identified the budget. What's kind of interesting is when I first started out my campaign, it was like, we're going to have $1 billion, and how are we going to spend that to make New Mexico better? And now that's gone. And not just that, but potentially another $1 billion. And then we are caught in this, basically most states, we can't print money like the federal government can. We don't have a Federal Reserve. So we're going to have to make some really difficult choices coming forward. Now, the legislature is going to be meeting sometime in June or July to redo the budget. And I think what I want to communicate today is we cannot cut essential services. We just cannot do that. Safety absolutely has to be there. Education, we've started with some major strides, and some people are going to be tempted to take away the early childhood foundation money they put in. And we can't do that. That's our future. So we've got to hold on to that. Education, we've been talking with the teachers the last couple of weeks. You know, we've got to get to an average $60,000 for our teachers. And you can say, well, how can you do that in face of this? So we're going to have to get creative. We're going to have to protect our essential services, and health is among that as well. And then we're going to have to go in and say, what creative revenues can we do today? I can talk about this later. Progressive taxation, doing more on that, get more taxation of the wealthy. I think we're going to have to go into the rainy day fund to be able to get through. And I know one question said, you know, will we have to tap into the land grant? And those are decisions they're going to have to make. So I think the key is, how do we get through to January 21st? Because I believe we're going to have a change in who's president. And the other piece that we have to do, you may not say this is highly related, but if the president can't get stuff passed, what are we going to be able to do to get money into the states? Nancy Pelosi wants to bring in $1 trillion to help the states, and the Senate is saying no. So one of the things I'd like to tell you all is, while we all want your money for our campaigns, you maybe don't want to spend it with us. You want to spend it on senatorial candidates in Montana, Colorado, Maine, keep Jones in Georgia, and so forth. Why? Because if we can take the Senate, we can get rid of the filibuster, and we can do the Roosevelt type of emergency funding we need to do to get the country back on its feet. So complicated question, and that will be a time in which we can get money to help with our budget.
Okay, thank you. Idalia?
Thank you for the question. So these are going to be the most challenging times we've seen in the history of the world. You know, the number one issue is how are we going to address the shortfall that is going to be devastating. Not only do we need to come up with diversification, but also, you know, working in a bipartisan effort. This is not going to be about Democrats, Republicans. This is where our state needs to come together. The number one issue as a state senator, it's going to be the budget shortfall. We expect it to be about $2 billion. Now, the New Mexico budget is $7.2 billion. It grew 17% the last 2 years. And because of the, you know, oil and gas royalties, which is 39% of the New Mexico general fund. So, and we have gross receipts tax too, which is 2 to 3 billion a year. Well, we're not going to have the 2 to 3 billion a year anymore of GRT because our small businesses are suffering. And I hear that only 1 out of 5 small businesses will survive this pandemic. And that just breaks my heart as a small business owner. So think about it, 40% of the $7.2 billion from, you know, for our state budget comes from oil and gas. That's $2.8 billion that we're not going to have anymore because the oil and gas, the barrels are not trading, they're trading negatively now. So our state budget that is $7.2 billion is estimated with oil trading at $50 a barrel. And that's where the $2 to $3 billion come from. That's not happening. So what are we going to do? How are we going to fix our economic crisis? You know, we have no surplus. We have a deficit. Now, is the federal government going to bail us out? Or, you know, should we tap into our reserves? We have about $2 billion in our reserves. Do we tap in that immediately and get it out? Or do we get a little bit of it so that we don't cut our essential needs in healthcare and early childhood? Or do we raise taxes? It is going to be extremely difficult times. And this is the time where we need to come together as a state and did I lose? Oh, sorry. We need to come together as a state, put politics on the side, and then, you know, work hard. One of the things I want to do is seek the admission to the Senate Finance Committee so that I'm able to help District 20 and the state of New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Okay, thank you for that great question. As people have already addressed, the most important thing is where are we going to get the funding that is not going to be there this next year? And it affects everything we do. And because we have a mandate for a balanced budget, we have no option but to balance our budget. So we're not going to be able to be like the federal government and go into deficit spending. So in order to get a balanced budget, we're going to have to replace those funds from oil and gas with a number of options. And it is possible to do, and I would like to just articulate some of those options that I feel are critical for us to address in the next legislative session. First of all, we're going to have to raise gas and oil taxes to the level of Texas, our neighbor. They have higher taxes, and we have basically been giving away our gas and oil. We need to legalize recreational marijuana so that we protect our medical marijuana, and that will be a tax that we can use to help fill this huge shortfall. We have to increase our capital gains tax because it's unfair for people that work to pay more taxes on their income than it is for people who don't work for it and invest it and pay less taxes. We've got to increase our taxes on people that are over $250,000 a year. And we've got to enforce white-collar crimes with fines so that there again, that's an opportunity to increase our funds. And I emphasize crimes. We are probably going to have to invest our rainy day funds somehow, and we want to do that in New Mexico. And one of the ways we do that is to set up the state bank. The state bank will allow those funds to be, the interest to go into the state coffers, and ultimately that will improve our revenue streams. And we've got to close our loopholes for corporations. For the last 8 years prior to our wonderful governor, now there were lots of loopholes put into the laws, and we've got to close those so that the corporations and the people that are making a lot of money, over $250,000, pay their fair share. So it's a twofold answer. We've got to increase our revenue, and then because we are so dependent on gas and oil, we have to diversify our economy. And we have to understand that our budget and the environment are inextricably connected. We are, as was pointed out, we've got we were in a surplus, and boom, now we're in a deficit and wondering where we're going to get that money. So we have to make sure that we work for the long term. These solutions are not a stopgap, 5-minute, one budget cycle answer. We're going to have to do some planning. We're going to have to do some prioritizing. And I believe that my scientific background in terms of analysis and accountability and transparency will help bring this planning cycle to the Senate. We've got to focus on wind and solar. We've got to focus.
I'm gonna interrupt you, Nancy. Yeah, you're about 2 minutes.
All right, I'm sorry. I did not see the sign, so I'm not sure where it was. But anyway, I apologize for going over. I didn't see your sign, Flora. I'm not sure where it is. Okay.
Oops.
Thank you, Nancy.
I think it may have to do with the video, the way your video is set up. So I can maybe at 2 minutes, if you're not seeing my sign, I'll just go ahead and give a verbal little, this is it. Okay?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, but I'm not seeing the sign either, Flora. So,
You
okay.
can put it on gallery mode and you'll be able to see it, if that helps.
It is on gallery mode, but I'm not seeing the sign. I don't know. So maybe a verbal time's up is good, Flora. Thank you. So Rebecca.
Great. So the challenges facing us, I can't believe I want this job, but I really do. So we're going to have some of the biggest challenges in New Mexico state history. First, we're going to have health, and right on the heels of that and interconnected is an economic challenge. And fortunately, I specialize in solving unique challenges that have never been solved before. And fortunately, I think, as Karen Kahn is pointing out, solving one may help with another. She had a good question in the chat. So first, healthcare. Our current healthcare system delivers neither health nor care, but it does produce profit for a few people. And I believe actually healthcare and economics are fundamentally interconnected. Healthcare is more foundational than a right. It's a necessity like food and water. For example, you can't really exercise your First Amendment right to free speech if you're lying in a hospital bed with a respirator breathing for you. So even if you want to be mercenary and crass about it, the best way to get us to a strong economy is to get us to strong healthcare. And as COVID-19 is demonstrating, that has to cover everybody, because if I get sick, I endanger all of you on the call here, right? So I support universal healthcare coverage. There's a lot of ways to get there. There's pros and cons to different plans. I don't have the time to go into them now, but one thing I could do as your senator in January is vote for the New Mexico Health Security Act, which would in one stroke, if the fiscal analysis in June is correct, give everybody paid sick leave, cover everyone, and probably save New Mexicans a lot of money right off the bat. So it's two problems solved in one stone. Second, then moving on to the economy, our state's what we're experiencing right now is that our state's entire undergirding fiscal scaffold, including our Constitution, is over a century old, and our stagnant, crashing oil market, which I don't think is coming back, folks, we have to think about it, our neglected foundations that COVID's revealing, and our economic system in the Constitution leads us time that we've got to re-examine the whole thing. Fortunately, as a state, we do have the land grant permanent funds, which is not the same as a rainy day fund. We use that for its distributions. And we already have what we need. So we can reimagine 3 phases of economic rescue, recovery, and then reimagine, for example, living wage for the people who are keeping us living, rewarding businesses for shorter supply chains, bring manufacturing home, like, for example, have small makers shops here, not big polluting factories like China. That with 3D printers and downloadable designs, and rewarding businesses for permitting work from home, which is easier for some families, as we're seeing. And last thing, I know my time is over. Before a business can declare bankruptcy, perhaps we allow the workers themselves to collect and purchase the business as a co-op, thereby saving our small businesses, keeping wages high, keeping the dollars here in New Mexico, and strengthening our communities. I can go on, but my time is short.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a question just for Wendy, I believe. As I told Wendy, I'm pretty ignorant about exactly what the county commission does. So this is one question that came out of my ignorance. How does the authority of the county commission intersect, if at all, with that of the sheriff's office?
And Rena, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. And it's interesting because as I've been talking to people around the community, a lot of folks don't really understand what the county commission does. So very briefly, I'll let you know. For example, if you live in most of Precinct 569, you would have District 4 county commissioner representing you because you're outside of the city limits, but you're within the county boundaries. So that's a really good way just to kind of describe it. There's a lot of areas in District 4 that are in unincorporated Bernalillo County. In specific regards to the sheriff's department, so there are 5 county commissioners and 5 other elected officials, one of which is the sheriff. The interesting thing about that relationship, though, is that it's the county commission that dictates the budget for all of the departments, even if it's for another elected official. So as you can imagine, that would cause some interesting conversations, right? So I know that there's been people who have been talking about restricting the sheriff's budget based on some of the things that people don't agree with him in terms of body cams and such. So yes, it's true. The county commission does dictate the budget, even if it's another elected official who runs that specific department. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, this next question is for the Senate and House candidates. And so I guess, Martin, you'd be the first one to take this question, which is, should the length of legislative sessions be extended, and should legislators and their staff be paid? Why or why not?
You know, that's a great question. When you look at the composition of the legislature and you think back like what was said by Lincoln and others, you know, a country of the people, by the people, for the people. I don't think this is a legislature of and by and for the people. There are lots of reasons that things happen that were probably good ideas in the beginning, such as, you know, being an agricultural state, we just had a session in the wintertime, but times have changed. And again, going back to my initial comments, I think that we have the opportunity to take this huge impact on us. I mean, this is like World War II or the Depression, and really sit down and do thorough analyses and come back out with what's going to work to make this a legislature that reflects the people. So what are we going to do? We're going to have to expand the time. The issues are far too complex, and if we want to get to healthcare as a right, it's not an overnight issue. Even Elizabeth Warren said it's going to take 10 years to do that. So that takes a lot of time to work through, figure out the steps. We then have to, in order for people to take the time, we got to pay them. Well, every other state does. I think we all know that, and we have to pay them well enough that they can really make this their first dedication in what they do. They may have another part-time job. There is no staff. As many of you have heard, my mother was a state senator back in the 70s. And when she was a senator, she not only had 2 staff in Springfield, she had 2 staff in her home district to take care of constituency issues. And we don't have anything like that. So we're going to have to rebuild the entire concept of what the legislature is. Now, this has gone down as a constitutional amendment lost every time to extend, to pay, and so forth. But I think we are in such a period of change, and if it's presented correctly, we have the opportunity to do all those things. Extend the period, pay the legislators, expand the staff to deal with these really complex, difficult issues, and be sure we get this state on the right track to be the great state that we can be.
Okay, thank you. Idalia?
Thank you. So when I was in the legislature, the bill was proposed to pay legislators. The reason for that is because it already is a full-time job. So, we have 30-day sessions, 60-day sessions. We do have a secretary and legislative assistant during the 30 or 60-day sessions. And that's the only staff that we have only during the session. So remember, we also have interim committees, which you're assigned to a committee and you meet throughout the whole year, and you travel the state and you go through different cities, and you have to vote, you have to travel, it's a full-time job. We are the only state legislature in the country that is a volunteer legislature that does not get paid. I do support that idea of paying our legislators and make them a full-time job. That way there are no conflict of interest, because a lot of us have businesses, and sometimes you have to recuse yourself because of the type of work that you do. If that may be a conflict of interest, if you're voting on legislation, in the New Mexico legislature. So, it's been working right now. I don't think if this bill is proposed in this 2021 session, because of our budget shortfall, I do not think we have the means to pass it right now. We don't have the money, but I think it's a good idea in theory, and I think we should look into it. I think that it will diversify the New Mexico legislature, and I think it will represent the districts and our community in a more accurate manner, because not only do you get people that are, you're going to get paid, you don't have the pressure of, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to, make my rent? How am I going to make my mortgage? Because you will be paid. And Flora is telling me my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Okay, great question. Well, as it's been pointed out, New Mexico is the only legislature across the country that does not pay its legislators. And these committee meetings can go all over the state. They can go on for hours, and it takes a lot of, just a second. Can you all see me?
No.
Okay, something happened to my video. Just one second.
Martin Hickey, would you please stop sharing your screen? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't, things were blanking out. Do whatever you need to do. I was just trying to get back the picture of everyone here.
Oh, okay. All right, now, I'd like the opportunity to start again, if I may.
Yes, I'm going
Thank
to
you.
restart your timer.
Thank you very much. So, the legislature is not paid. And we've got to bring our state into the 21st century. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is to pay legislators. Now, there are pros and cons to that decision, just like any other decision that a legislator makes. It will increase diversity, and that's a good thing. We are a very diverse state, and the legislature needs to represent the people. It's fair to compensate people for their work. So I would support legislation to pay legislators depending on the details of the legislation. One of the things that we could possibly do, even with the funding problems that we're going to have, and we need to investigate professional support staff for the legislators. That might be an interim solution so that we relieve some of the pressure off of the legislators. Certainly, they're currently overworked, and part of that is because they have no staff. So I think an interim solution would be to get some paid staff and then investigate and make a plan. You know, I'm a scientist. I want to analyze the situation, and I want to make sure that we have a plan to execute it in a proper manner. Again, my concern would be where we're going to get the funds and because it's a zero-sum game in New Mexico. If you spend something, you're going to have to cut something else. And I articulated a number of things where we could increase our funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rebecca.
This is a great question, and George Richmond, thank you for asking it. So yes, New Mexico's sessions are among the shortest in the US, and as I know from years of solving complicated problems, new and complicated problems like the one that COVID is forcing upon us, they take time to discuss and to solve. But this is not an either or up down. We could do this incrementally. So if paying legislators right off the bat is cost prohibitive, in the meantime, we could consider shifting committee meetings, hearings to the year so that our floor session becomes, or our January session becomes entirely a floor session. We could pay just legislative staff, so at least the legislative analysis isn't rushed and isn't unilateral. And we could upgrade the floor rules and some of the laws so that some legislative business could be conducted like we're doing today on Zoom. As I know from working all over New Mexico, this is a vast state, and it's really unfair to ask rural communities and legislators to drive to Santa Fe to get any work done. In terms of paying legislators, yes, for many of the reasons said here, that functionally our current system deprives us of the leadership talent that we need to solve the problems that we're in. If you're only drawing resources or drawing leaders from a limited pool, we're denying ourselves leadership talent and diversity, and that means creativity and good ideas. And I will say, Alaska has half our state budget, and they pay their state legislators and 2 paid full-time staffers. So there is a way to do it. And I am curious if actually this will wind up saving us money. I will say that for me, this question is really personal because as far as I'm a candidate who has to work for a living, and I'm one of the few candidates in the working class, in the 99%, who has a job who could make it work. I could take 1 movie a year, take a pay cut, and make it work and both serve. And so I consider it kind of an obligation to those of us who have to work to run for office to represent the voices of those of us who have to juggle mortgage and budget and families, and represent real family voices up on the floor of the Roundhouse. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a question proposed about how New Mexico should respond to the economic problems caused by the pandemic, which I think, pardon?
I think Julie Brenning was going to respond to that question as well, the last question.
Oh, sorry, Julie.
That's no problem. No problem.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I agree a lot with what actually Rebecca said. She said a lot of my ideas. I want to get way more innovative about how we can be legislators. Let's do virtual meetings. let's get innovative. Let's get creative so that we can pay for staff. Now, how many young mothers are there in the state legislature right now? Does anyone know the answer? It's 0. I will be the only young mother in the state legislature. Why? Because there are real economic barriers for someone like me who has a 10-month-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old to run for office, but I'm doing it anyway. And I think it's so important that we get the young parents in the state legislature, that we get low-income individuals into the state legislature. We have to have diversity and representation in this state. And right now, I think we can do so much better. And for me personally, it would be essential that we have those paid staff and that help, so that we can also be parents, that we can also do what we need to do in our personal lives. So I'm a huge advocate of doing this, but I think we should also do it based on evidence. We need to, as many of the candidates said, analyze. We need to do this incrementally. We can do this creatively, but I do think we need to do it.
Okay, thank you. Again, my apologies. So all of you, I think, have addressed in your opening statements and in the question about challenges, what New Mexico should do to deal with the economic downturn. But another question that's been submitted about the aftermath of the pandemic is this one. Given New Mexico's effective response to the pandemic, do you think that response might encourage new businesses and others to come to New Mexico, to move here? So if you would like to begin, Idalia.
Sounds good. Okay, so do you mind repeating the question one more time?
Do you think that the way that New Mexico has responded so effectively to the pandemic might encourage other people and businesses to move here, to relocate here?
I think so. I think we've had a very strong leadership from our governor, where, you know, she put down some stay-at-home orders, and you know, I think politics and leadership of a governor and of elected officials makes a difference, makes it more attractive to businesses to want to move in. But, you know, that's going to also, and which is great because it's another source of economic development, you know, which we desperately need right now. What I'm thinking, you know, also is the gross receipts tax. Maybe we can attract more businesses by changing a little bit our structure for gross receipts tax. You know, most businesses move elsewhere to avoid paying the gross receipts tax, but, you know, I think that New Mexico should look into a way of either lowering or getting rid of the gross receipts tax. More businesses would come to New Mexico and they would provide more jobs for our families. Also look into tax incentives. You know, we are in a completely economic downfall right now, and it's gonna take, New Mexico is always a little slower, and it's gonna take longer than other states to recover. I mean, the last time we had a recession, it took New Mexico so long to recover, and I think that that's, you know, that could be a possibility, absolutely. But, you know, also, how do we work with these businesses to make sure that we diversify our economy and we attract and grow new industries to create more jobs for New Mexicans? And I think that that has to do with how do we diversify our economy? Well, you know, we looking to focus on key industries and economies where New Mexico can be the nation and lead using our state's unique assets, and emphasize on building in industries where there is already momentum. One of my dreams is to make New Mexico the capital of renewable energy, because we have so much sun, we have so much land for wind farms. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Nancy. Are you there? Nancy?
Yes, okay. I had myself on mute. Well, when it comes to the COVID-19, we just have to come to grips with the fact that this coronavirus is going to be with us for some time. And we're just going to have to make sure and we have had great leadership from our governor, and for that I am truly grateful. We're going to have to be able to test, we're going to have to be able to trace, we're going to have to be able to treat until there is a vaccine, which at the very minimum would be a year. So we have to come to grips with that it's not going to go away. And therefore and thusly, the economic pain is not going to go away either. We're going to have to understand that e-commerce is going to continue. So our small businesses must be assisted in learning how to do that, because most people are going to resist going out as much until there's a vaccine. So the state can help with short-term loans and also helping small businesses do business classes, how to sell over the internet, for example. That would help businesses stay in business. In terms of the gross receipts tax, I know that's a huge amount of money for the state and it's going to be much lower. We might consider changing that to a sales tax. That is a regressive tax, just like the gross receipts tax, but it is more fair and it is more transparent. And in the long term and in the short term both, we need to concentrate on tech transfer because these are super good jobs. They will help New Mexico grow. They will keep New Mexico graduates here in New Mexico. And as a parent, that's what we want. We want our kids to stay in New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca.
I love this question. Will our actions on COVID attract other people to move to New Mexico? I sure hope so. And I think so. As we've seen, our governor is getting very high rankings for how she's handling COVID. And that's one of the reasons I'm so ferocious about getting into office right now, is that now is the time, or if we make a few small key changes, we can position New Mexico to be in a really advantageous spot, not just post-COVID, but also in the decades to come as our climate warms and economies shift and the whole power structure of the planet changes. So I'm hoping we can make some moves to craft a part of a more stable, more resilient, and more equitable economy. This is not going to be the last catastrophe. So for example, like I said, if we implement universal health care here, you can imagine folks are going to want to come here. This will be like a COVID haven. If we do small things right now, also like plant trees and change our building codes so that we become climate resilient, will become very attractive in the 5, 10, 15 years when basically the coasts kind of become uninhabitable. There's other things that we can do right now. Obviously, the more diverse our economy, the better we're able to withstand any kind of future catastrophe. And we're also a more attractive place to live. So little things like, I'd love to use some capital outlay money to build a series of hiker through huts in some of our beautiful dark sky areas, so that like in Switzerland, you can hike all day and then spend the night in a beautiful hut under our gorgeous night skies, which by the way are endangered, and then get up and hike some more. That would create rural jobs, it would create renewable jobs, and it would make us a very attractive place. But in all of these things, oh, and we have to invest in infrastructure, not for the 20th century, but for the 21st century. So that's rural broadband and climate change resilient cities and bike lanes and things like that. But in every case, it's got to work for our current budget now, but few dollars invested now will multiply into many in the future.
Okay, thank you. Wendy, no, Julie. Julie is up next, sorry.
Thank you. You know, I really agree with a lot of the statements that the candidates have made, and I kind of want to take and answer this question in a different way. Something that I've recognized with analyzing and looking at the nations, I do international relations. I speak fluent Mandarin. I've lived in China and Taiwan. is I look at how leaders are handling this issue and that we need to continue this kind of leadership into the future. And as part of the research that I've done is I have researched what makes effective public policy. And I believe New Mexico is nailing it on the head right now with our leadership, and I want to join the leadership ranks. And I'm just going to briefly go over the 5 elements that make up good public policy, and we need to continue this. The first one is we need to look at how a policy impacts families, particularly women and children. That's absolutely essential. It's not profits first, it's families first. Number 2, is the policy evidence-based? Is there good data? Is it peer-reviewed data? And I love that the governor is doing this. That's why we're winning this fight, is because she is basing it on data. Okay, number 3, policy needs to be multi-pronged. We need to get everyone at the table that this is going to impact. We need stakeholders, we need citizens, we need nonprofits, we need everyone working together on good public policy. Number 4, we need to make sure the public policy is about human connection. For instance, when we are talking about people coming out of jail, is rehabilitation about human connection? Human connection is essential. When you leave out that element of public policy, policy fails. Number 5, we need to have effective evaluation of public policy. We need to be flexible and evaluate how we've done. So for me, I want to be that leader that will continue to do well for New Mexico, just like the example of our governor and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Karen, I love this question. And like Julie said, she kind of wants to talk about a different narrative with this. So do I. So let's think about it for a minute. Instead of thinking, what kind of businesses can we attract to New Mexico? Why don't we start thinking in terms of who do we want in New Mexico to support us, right? Sometimes it's challenging because we try so hard to prove ourselves to organizations and to businesses. And I think that, like Julie said, I think that it's great that the governor's been really doing well with this and really concentrating and focusing on the things that are right and balancing the need between people needing to go back to work and people like my little immunocompromised family that need to stay safe. But I want people to start thinking about it that way. What kind of businesses do you want in New Mexico? Do you want businesses that take care of employees? Do you want businesses that protect the environment? Do you want businesses that bring a benefit to the community? So I would like to try and shift that narrative a little bit and have people start thinking that way, because we're doing great. And I think that sometimes we sell ourselves a little bit short. And I prefer to think about it that way. So thank you so much. And I believe that Martin would like to speak now too.
Oh, sorry, did I skip someone? No, it's your turn. Martin, you're on mute.
There we go. How's that?
Good.
Okay, better than the waving hand like in the classroom. So I really want to answer this question because it's a tremendous one and we are going to face this. But what I didn't hear from anybody else is, and you asked that could we attract, you know what? We have more PhDs per capita in New Mexico than any other state in the country. We have tremendous resources. We have, I'm looking at the sun that's changing the color here, and we have the sun, and we have wind, and it's April, it's wind time. So we have a lot to develop here. The question is, can we get capital outside of New Mexico to come in and help us, as well as it was referenced, can we be sure that we're putting money aside in small business development, and those businesses can develop and grow. And we have this dependence on oil, and the oil goes somewhere else. Well, you know what? If we get the wind and solar and getting the electricity, we can send that somewhere else, and we can tax it, and we can support the economy even further. So I just think, yes, we post-COVID, we're going to have to do a lot of self-examination, but let's look at what we got, because it's tremendous, and can we nurture it? When Julie talking about data, RS21 is a small data business that started with nuclear engineered data scientists. They'd blow things up in the cyclotron, and then they'd look at it. And they went out and they built a big data business that is now exploding. We know because we helped them get off the ground in healthcare, and they are bringing money into New Mexico incredibly. So I just wanted to be sure that we didn't skip over that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to a couple of questions that the answers might be fairly short, maybe. So this question is for everyone, I think. Have you signed the pledge not to take any fossil fuel money in support of your campaigns? And Nancy is the first to answer this one. Nancy, take it off mute.
Yeah, I am. Okay, yes, as a matter of fact, I have, and I'm very proud of that, because we are never going to be able to change our state until we get off of fossil fuels. It's a diet, and we've got to wean ourselves off of it, and yes, it's going to be painful. We've got to have a transition plan, and we've got to have a fund that supports that plan. And this is a critical element for New Mexico because we are a huge contributor to global warming with our oil and gas production, as well as the methane off-gassing in our oil fields in the Permian Basin, as well as other places like the northwest corner. So we've got to make sure that we have a plan. We've got to figure out what are the long-term requirements for our state to do better. And one of these is to get off of fossil fuels. Now, there's been a number of items discussed going to wind and solar are very good, but we've got to peel back the onion a little bit and make sure that we understand that, number one, we're not going to be able to use all the power that we generate by these large wind and solar farms, and we are going to have to deal with the issues of transmission lines. So what are we going to do when transmission lines go near people? They must be buried because there is weak evidence that there is cancer-causing effects, especially in children. And also, what about the huge bird flyway up and down the Rio Grande Valley? These lines, these transmission lines kill hundreds of thousands of birds every year, and it will only be worse if we transmit wind and solar power across our state. So I'm not opposed to it, but we need to peel back the onion and make sure that we understand the implications of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thanks. Rebecca?
Thanks, Tom. Yes, I have signed the no fossil fuel pledge. I'm getting the words wrong. And I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club, and I've been endorsed by the Conservation Voters of New Mexico. Why? I'm all about New Mexico's future, and oil and gas might have been our past, but it's not our future. And the transition to a post-oil and gas economy is not in the future, it's right now. The bottom has dropped out of the market. I don't see it coming back. And right now we have hungry families in the diagonal corners of our states that we desperately need to take care of immediately. We are in a global environmental crisis, and we have to shift from an extractive economy to a circular economy, one that's measured not by growth, but by flow. And the good news is that we're finally at the point where we have the technology that we can. And so if I'm senator, I want us to urge myself to stop thinking of environment and water as separate issues over there, but instead integrate the environment into every piece of legislation. So for example, I want to add an environmental analysis to every bill, along with the fiscal analysis that we already do. I want to upgrade our tax structure so that in general, we tax what's destructive and we incentivize what's healthful, so that Doritos are more expensive than broccoli. And I want to use our technology not to help us extract from the earth more efficiently, but to heal and cultivate and nourish our earth. And here in New Mexico, we could do things like create special economic zones like TIDS, but not whose goal is not corporate wealth, but community health. I have another idea. For example, we have right now something called nonprofit, where if you're an organization that does good for the community, we acknowledge that good to the community. In return, we call you a nonprofit and we give you a tax break. And I want to create a second parallel category called non-carbon, where if you can do business, any kind of business in an improved way, and emit net low or no carbon, we call you a non-carbon and give you a similar kind of incentive. So there's lots of ideas that we can do right here in New Mexico to grow up what we have and take our proper place in the pantheon of solar and wind states in the leadership of it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
Yes, I did sign the pledge. Thank you, Tom. And I am fully supportive of all of these, some of the measures, but one thing that I'd like to bring up is making sure that we have a green fund in place, using some of our permanent land grant funds for a green fund. And this fund would go towards those innovative ideas that Rebecca was just talking about, to some of those, the air, the wind, renewable energy, electric cars, all of those things. That is the future of New Mexico. When I look at my little children, I don't think, gosh, they're going to rely on oil in their future. I think they are going to rely on technology. They're going to rely on renewable energy. This is the future of New Mexico. And I fully support that. Now, I'm just going to do a little advertising here. My opponent, Bill Ream, is fully funded by oil and gas. And so because I made that pledge, I need more donations basically to equal out with his, because he has thousands and thousands of dollars from big oil. So I'm just going to do a little plug there. Because I signed that, I'm going to need some donations that will counteract his oil and gas donations. But yes, I'm a huge proponent of making sure we diversify and get out of the rut of oil and gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you so much. Rebecca, I love what you said. And another issue that we need to take into consideration, not only water and environment, we also need to think about the health aspect of this. My fiance, like I told you, is a double lung transplant recipient. He's been an electrician since he was 15 years old. Worked for the union here in town, but worked right up. And he wound up having to move down to the Permian Basin. He worked in a potash mine as an electrician for years, and then also worked out in the oil fields. He lived in Hobbs and worked in the oil fields. The environmental impact damage that did to him, it basically turned his lungs into Swiss cheese. So when we talk about environmental impact, my heart is in it, because I saw what it did to him and I've seen what it does to others. So I may come from this from a different perspective, but Tom, email me, Wendy, forburnco@gmail.com, and I will sign that right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin?
Yes, thank you. Of course, signing the pledge, that's pretty straightforward. This is going to be a little more personal to all of us who are here, at least in the senatorial race. We will have a likely Republican, which one of us it is, will have a Republican opponent who, at least in terms of money and organization, is well ahead. And that's Corrine Foster. And Corrine, for basically her lobbying career, represents the independent oil and gas producers. So we're going to see that money coming in at us. And when this primary is over, whoever wins, we're going to need funding to help fight against them. But you know what? This is a fight you want to have. That's what's great about it. I mean, it's kind of almost good and evil, black and white. So absolutely the pledge, and then we can talk about how we're going to wind down the fracking in the future. I encourage you all to read Rachel Maddow's book about oil in Oklahoma and the fracking and the earthquakes that it's caused. So it's not only the methane leakage and what have you, but it's also what it's doing to the land and the people, and the land is sacred. So I am personally looking forward, hope to absolutely win this primary, and really looking forward to running against her.
Thank you, Martin. Idalia.
Thank you. I have not signed the pledge, no, and that does not mean I don't support our Mother Earth. I already have a voting record, you know, and I've already been endorsed in the past. In my last campaign, I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club and Conservation Voters, and I do have a voting record already. And a lot of candidates take money from oil and gas. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to vote for it. But the reality is that campaigns are expensive. And a lot of Democrats take money from oil and gas to fund their campaigns. And not necessarily means that they're going to vote for them. You know, I think one of the things that I can do as your next state senator, the Energy Transition Act that the governor passed a couple years, I think one of the main things that we can do is continue to support it, make sure that it doesn't get repealed. You know, and that'll be 50% of New Mexico's electricity generated from renewable energy resources by 2030. And this increases to 80% by 2040. And then by 2045, the state's electricity grid will be 100% carbon free. So, you know, I think the renewable energy is happening right now. We are very, very blessed with the opportunity to have a future with so many options with New Mexico, you know, blessed with some of the best renewable resources anywhere in the United States. And I think that, you know, I'm very proud that the governor took bold steps in making this renewable energy future happen with this Energy Transition Act. And we just got to keep moving New Mexico forward and make sure that we're maximizing the creation of wind and solar with the abundance of the resources that we have. And in doing so, we need to make sure that the companies that are developing these resources are training our children for the workforce of the future and providing good jobs that can help our economy thrive and provide good wages for our families. So, you know that I want to work hard and fight with the governor to make sure that our renewable energy future is a reality. Climate change and global warming are real, and we must protect our Mother Earth for our children and their children's children to love and enjoy.
Okay, thank you. This is a question for Wendy. The question is, what are your ideas or plans for fire prevention and or mitigation in the foothills neighborhoods that we live in here?
That's a great question. If anybody looks outside their door, like Martin was saying today, we're in for a rough fire season. And I know that Julie has also worked for Commissioner Muscotti before and has an intimate knowledge of fire protection and prevention. I think that first and foremost, residents need to take care of their own properties and to make sure that they are protected themselves. I know that there's some really good policies in place with the county in regards to that, some great information. I think that the most important thing with this is that we just need to be prepared and ready for it, because it's not a matter of if it's going to happen this summer. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen and where it's going to land. Just to let you all know that during the Doghead fire, I actually worked at the county for several years. I worked for Commissioner Hart Stebbins in her office, and then I also worked for the County Public Information Office. During that time, I was certified as a FEMA Public Information Officer, both not only with the county, but also when I worked up in Santa Fe with the state. So I do have an intimate knowledge about how emergency operations do work. So when you're talking specifically about fire, it's just all about preparation and making sure that we have the budget and the wherewithal to take care of it. But with the experience that I bring to the table in terms of that, I can really be beneficial. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Martin, did I skip over you?
Oh, no,
No.
you just asked the one question to Wendy.
Okay, the one before. I didn't skip over you in that, did I? No, I don't think so. Okay, so this is a quickie question.
Edwina, do you mind, would I be able to address this question as well?
Are you sure?
Thank you for that. So the issue of wildfire is really interesting because it just so happens that the single greatest area of most concern to the firefighters that I've worked with for 15 years in all the entire state of New Mexico happens to be Senate District 20. Because of the wildland urban interface we have here, if Albuquerque is going to burn like California has burned, it probably will have originated here in the foothills by lightning, by a hiker, by a homeless camp. And there's 4 big issues that need to be solved. And I hopefully look forward to collaborating with Wendy on this. 1, there's the issue of defensible space. 2, egress with the roads and the way they work up here. Homeowner preparedness, and then prevention. And I'll talk about them just briefly. So defensible space, one of the issues is we have a patchwork of different HOAs that have different regulations about how much you can cut or trim vegetation and what's required. And I'll tell you, the reason that I want to be involved as a state senator is some laws need to be changed to protect the HOAs from being sued, because right now they're petrified of issuing any regulations about defensible space, because if they happen to say the wrong thing and the neighborhood burns down, they're petrified of being sued. So there's a legal solution there. In terms of egress, this is where the county commission would hopefully coordinate, because there's so many overlapping jurisdictions. There's the Bernalillo County Office of Emergency Management. There's the Bernalillo County Fire and Rescue. There's the Albuquerque Fire Department, City of Albuquerque Open Space, Bernalillo County, Cibola National Forest, Sandia Pueblo, and then all the private homeowners and lots of neighborhood associations. And I happen to have worked with all of them at some point over the last 15 years. And I have the relationships in place to solve this issue. Like I know Lieutenant Brian Fox of AFD, Sandia Governor Paisano, District Ranger Crystal Powell, and hopefully maybe now Wendy. And I also live up here, and I'm a triathlete and I run these trails. So I ran Piedra Lisa this morning. So as your senator, I would take the lead in this, because the state is the natural entity to solve the issues of all the competing overlapping jurisdictions. And the last thing I'll say is there is a solution that involves goats grazing in the arroyos. And that's something that I want to look into using capital outlay money to help fund, because it's been proven to work in the Sandia Heights foothills. Okay, enough. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to answer that question also, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So our house backs up to the open space. So I have a personal interest in wildfires. And this issue is all along the foothills area and District 20. It's all about the urban wildland interface, which is where a lot of us live. And because we are entering the summer, which is wildfire season, we have climate disruption. So it is almost inevitable that we're going to have a wildfire. And basically, most of the wildfires are caused by humans. I won't repeat the calls: cigarette butts, fireworks, so forth. So the prevention is the key. And there is so much that homeowners can do personally. We can have a defensible space around our house from 30 feet to 100 feet. And we can make sure that our trees are planted 10 feet apart, and we can prune the overhanging limbs near our homes, and we can remove pine needles. So those are things that we can actually do. And one of the things that we've got to understand is that landscaping is something that really protects our home, because if it's well watered, it's not going to burn. It's the dried flowers and the dry grass that's going to burn. And we can retrofit our houses with screens and spark arresters and change our roof if necessary. But the one thing I'd like to tell you all that I'm so excited about is that because I have a pool and I'm concerned about fire, I am going to be getting a gas-powered pump, so that when I have hopefully I never do, but if we do have a wildfire, I will be able to protect my home personally with all that water in my swimming pool, and you all can do the same as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we have a little bit more than 15 minutes for questions. And I want to say, if your question didn't get asked and answered, I apologize for that. I'm happy to say that we got lots of questions, but sorry to say we couldn't ask them all. So I think you will have information about the websites for all the candidates, and I'm sure they would welcome your questions if you direct them to their websites. Let me just ask a couple of other questions here. This is a quickie one about the environment. So each of you gets 30 seconds to answer this question. Starting with Rebecca. What single thing do you think should be done, single action, to cut the state's climate emissions in half by 2030? Quickie response. You're on mute.
That's a trick question because the way that we've got to, I'm sorry, I'm going to challenge the question. The way that we've got to all these carbon emissions is not one single source, but a whole diversity. We have transportation, we have construction, we have houses, you know, we have our grid. And so we have to unfortunately address all of them. There is no single bullet. So I guess the single thing that I would do is not focus on a single thing.
Okay. Wendy.
Julie.
Julie's not. I keep getting the order wrong. Julie, you're up next.
Sorry, Wendy. So for me, I think that this needs funding. We need a budget that's set aside specifically to address climate change, to address the environment, and to address renewable energy. So as I stated before, I would support a green fund. That comes a small percentage out of the permanent land grant. So that would be my number one first choice, is to make sure that we have the funding first.
Great, thanks. Wendy.
Thank you. I was just writing some diligent notes here. So firstly, I'm fortunate enough to be able to work for a company that is allowing me to telecommute during this time. So I would love for that to be something that would be continued to where people can work from home. I would think that we need to incentivize renewable energy. And I also think that we need to start training workforces to be able to handle that new energy economy that we're all looking so desperately for.
Okay, Martin.
Oh, I'm here. Okay, great. I just want to note that with all the cars off the streets all over the world, we have reduced our emissions by about 3% carbon emissions. The scientists say, nice, but it's going to take 7%. So, but we need to push electronic vehicles in this state. We got to get the tax breaks. We should be setting up the, you know, like the old gas stations when the cars came out and the horses went away. We should be setting up the electric recharge right now. I mean, they'll be more efficient in the future, but we should be doing that right now, particularly wind and solar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Idalia.
Thank you. So I would start a bilingual campaign because we are a border state and we need to attract more businesses internationally with Mexico. And I would start a campaign where it makes New Mexico the national leader of renewable energy. And what does that mean? You know, everybody's going to know that New Mexico is going to have tax incentives for electric cars. We're going to incentivize business that are green, and we're going to reward those companies that allow people to work from home. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Okay, so the single action I would take, although Rebecca is certainly right, one action won't cut it, is to develop a just transition plan and fund parts of that plan every year in a methodical manner. And firstly, we must address the huge methane problem over the Permian Basin as well as the northwest corner. This methane is much worse than carbon. It is a huge problem and it is underreported, especially in the Permian Basin. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What do you recommend are the measures that should be taken to reduce gun violence, with an emphasis on reducing gun violence in our schools, or eliminating the possibility of gun violence in our schools? And we'll start with Julie.
Fantastic. This is a great question because this is part of my expertise. So do I get the full 2 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Fantastic. As I addressed before, public safety is actually one of my top priorities. And I'm an affiliate of the largest database in the world on the status of women globally. And the research that we do looks at peace and security of communities and nations. And you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with gun violence? It has everything to do with gun violence. As women are empowered, particularly in the home and in relationships and in the home, gun violence goes down. So for instance, we need to tackle domestic violence. It needs to be one of our #1 priorities in this state. We have one of the highest rates of domestic violence in the nation. It is the root causes of why we have violent crime in this state. We need to make sure that all of our rape kits are tested. Thank you, Mayor Keller. We need to make sure that we take those seriously. We need to make sure that women, particularly Indigenous women, we take care of that problem of the murder of Indigenous women. It's a huge issue. Now, some of you may be asking, what does this have to do? Again, with gun violence, it has everything to do with it. When families are safe, when women are safe, the rising generation can grow up in a safe environment, and it's less likely that they are going to enter crime. Okay, so it's so important that we get to these root causes. Now, I'm also going to talk about intervention. So those are the root causes. Let's talk about intervention. So it's still happening right here in New Mexico, right? So we need to get the guns out of the hands of the domestic violence accusers. We need to get the hands out of those who are showing red flags. We need to make sure that those guns are not accessible in those situations. And that is absolutely essential. I am a member of Moms Demand Action, and I'm active in that group. And I expect to get their candidate recommendation. And I completely, 15 more seconds, dang. All right, well, if anyone else has more questions, please go to my website. I could talk to you for a long time about safety and security. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy.
Thank you so much. So I like what Julie was saying about intervention. I also think that we need to start taking into account that behavioral health systems are not at full functioning. And although the county does have a system and has a path that has started to work, I believe that we still need to start considering expanding upon behavioral health for New Mexicans and for Bernalillo County residents. I also am a champion of Moms Demand Action, and it's a complicated subject that you want people to be able to take good care of themselves, and to have guns in the home where there's going to be problems and issues is a recipe for disaster. And so I believe that we need to go ahead and start taking care of things at the root of the system, which is mostly behavioral health. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin.
Yeah, let me start with behavioral health. I mean, let's get to the root cause here. And just so that you all know, I just filled out my gun sense questionnaire and answered every one of their proposals positively. Will absolutely support. But we have to get to the root of why this happens. And that is because behavioral health, and this, we got to treat this with early childhood education, is rebuilding the behavioral health infrastructure. But behavioral health is where a lot of violence starts. And we can rebuild that infrastructure, and in rebuilding it, a number of people will not see violence as a way to settle issues. And that also goes with early childhood education. Getting those models started early in life that you can talk and settle conflict. But then we've just got to do the other basic things, such as in the mom's questionnaire. You got to get guns out of the home. Or if they're in the home, then they have to be locked up. They can't go into a home where there's been domestic abuse. Absolutely have to take that away. Assault weapons have to go. On and on. I mean, we should be really proud in New Mexico because we passed the red flag law, and we're one of the first states to do that. And that is incredible. So we've got something to build on here, but don't forget the root cause. And then the other thing is that, you know, kind of with what the county is doing in behavioral health with crisis management, we've got to get This is where the police and the behavioralists are getting together, but we got to get the school system and the police together so they have an absolute rapid response. The last thing I ever want to see is armed teachers in the school. That is just crazy. We'll just leave that to Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. Idalia.
Thank you. So the red flag did pass. The governor signed that law into legislation into law, which allow courts to order the temporary seizure of firearms from individuals deemed danger to themselves or others. However, we are in a crime epidemic. When I'm in the legislature, I'm going to fight to make sure that APD, Sheriff's Department, because we have city and county in Senate District 20, make sure that they have the resources that they need to fight the crime. And that includes capital outlay monies so they can get more cop cars, more equipment to analyze crimes better. And also, we need more cops on the street. We need to support our law enforcement as much as we can. And yes, that is also tied to behavioral health. I think we also need to make sure that our Medicaid behavioral health budget is fully funded. When I was in the legislature, I sponsored legislation for homelessness, substance abuse, mental illness, to make sure that they have the help and transition. If you've been in jail, make sure that they have a way to transition out of jail to become citizens again. And I think I lost you all, but so I think it has to do that. But walking my district, a lot of people, because we're in the foothills, we have wildlife. A lot of people, they want their gun rights, and they want to be able to protect themselves. They want to be able to make sure that their guns are not taken away because of our crime epidemic, so that they don't, to protect their property. Number one issue in this area is property crime. So that's been my encounter.
Thank you. Nancy.
Okay, well, I've got to tell you that I am a gun owner, and but I also support doing a lot of things for, first of all, gun violence, universal background checks, banning the sale of assault weapons, banning large magazines, banning converters to make weapons fully automatic. And of course, I do support the red flag law, because should this be a false accusation against someone, then it can be quickly reversed. And one thing I didn't hear is that we've got to incentivize people to turn in guns. California has a great program where if you turn in a gun, you get a debit card to the grocery store. It's been very, very successful. So I believe in incentivizing people to turn in guns. Now, because I'm a grandmom, and I have 2 little girls in public school here in New Mexico, I absolutely care about school gun violence. And the studies indicate that the way that we address this is to make schools a softer place rather than a harder place. Prevention is the first step, and it has to do with the school climate. What is their approach to discipline and behavior? Do we have the available counselors and social workers that can address the children that are troubled? Because teachers know who these kids are. And we have to have a social emotional curriculum, so kids learn how to deal with their differences instead of bullying. And so we've got to, when there is a threat, we've got to make sure that there is a threat assessment team that goes in and checks the situation out, so that when we have a threat, we address it immediately and effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Thank you. So I love this question. So for me, expecting, the tendency is to focus on the point of a moment of violence, which for me in my animal brain grabs my attention. And that deserves attention, but also there's sometimes years and years of events that have led up to that moment. So for me, expecting police to stop all crime and all gun violence is like expecting the emergency room to stop all disease. It doesn't address the root causes, and it's inefficient, and it's expensive, and it's unfair to our officers. And I know this because I worked alongside nearly every police jurisdiction in New Mexico: NMSP, BCSO, Torrance County, Valencia, Socorro, Santa Fe County, I can go on. Plus a lot of our tribal officers, plus I've worked inside a lot of our jails. I put Mel Gibson in the SEG 4 Supermax unit over at MDC. I think we got him out, but I don't know. I'm also a member of Moms Demand Action as well. And I've also experienced gun violence in my own family. And so I come at this, and I've also worked in a lot of neighborhoods. I've stood in meth houses, I've stood in our estates, I've worked in schools. And so I've seen all the different perspectives. And I think there are 8 root causes of crime I'm gonna go through super quick. And they start sometimes years before. And to really solve the problem, we need to solve all 8 problems. And that's why we haven't moved the needle, is because unfortunately it's hard and it's complicated, and I want to solve it. I like hard and complicated things. So unsupported families and weak communities, unsupported schools and teachers, a poor job market and sometimes poor job training, poor support for mental and behavioral health, including anti-violence and addiction programs. We need the ability to do tougher sentencing and gentler sentencing. By the way, the judiciary is 1/3 of our state, but only gets 4% of the budget, or 3% of the budget. Unproductive jail time, I've seen it myself. There's folks sitting there twiddling their thumbs that could be learning a job or getting treatment skills. And the last thing, overdue gun reform, and of course, better support for our police, more training, and different recruitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody got to answer that question, right? We're about out of time for questions because we have to leave time for closing statements. And I just want to tell you briefly some of the questions that were submitted that we haven't gotten to. I mean, the whole area of healthcare, apart from behavioral health care, we didn't get to at all. And one of the questions had to do with what policies or procedures should be implemented to make the state ready for future pandemics. There were questions about capital outlay fund. There were questions about tax reform. There were questions about how you might make the government work better. So I don't know if you want to address any of these things in your closing statements, but we really, in order to stick to our timetable, need to start those now. And so we're going to do those in reverse order, starting with Rebecca.
And do we need to clarify, are we doing 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you all 37 of you that have hung in so far. I am just so excited about all the energy we have around our democracy and our government here in New Mexico. I'm going to end by quoting from one of my favorite teachers, Ilia Delio, who says, "Breakdown can be breakthrough if we recognize the new pattern of life struggling to emerge." Obviously, COVID has ushered in massive disruptions, and as your senator, I'll focus on working families and helping us recover our deep connection to each other and to the planet. I'm really concerned about New Mexico and about our communities, and I understand that to thrive and to thrive, we have to unify and we have to create new ways of being together in this world. So to do this massive work, we need leaders who can see the whole system and how it fits together. We need leaders who, for example, will listen to what doctors are saying about rural healthcare and understand that the solution might actually be to upgrade rural broadband to create telehealth, for example. We also need leaders who can operate on different scales, like a statewide scale, but then also I'm working right now with Mayor Keller on switching the substation in Montgomery and Tramway from open space to becoming a police station again, and working with the folks to help our prairie dog colony on Tramway finally get the capital outlay money that it needs to finish that restoration work. So we need leaders who can see the whole picture, and we also need leaders who can help us resist the urge to just flee exactly back to normal, and instead help us take what we like from what we had, learn the changes or learn the lessons that are being given to us from COVID, and make some good improvements if we're wise and we're willing to go forward to something better. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy, no, sorry, Julie. No, I'm wrong, Nancy.
Okay.
These days, Nancy.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for this. It's been very enlightening, very informative, and actually fun. So there are huge changes that the COVID virus has made in our society, and they will continue to be there. And we just have to work with that and work to the final solution, which is ultimately a vaccine. Now, I've lived in New Mexico since 1958. So I have seen a lot of changes, both good and bad. And we need to focus on, number one, making sure that we save what's good about New Mexico, because there are many, many things about New Mexico that are fantastic. Our environment, our wildlife, the people, all of these are great assets, and we need to make sure that we protect those. And we have to work toward moving our state into the 21st century. There are so many things in terms of our state government that do not address the issues that are with us today. And we have to remember that all of these issues, whether it's budget, whether it's the environment, whether it's education, they are all interconnected. And when you change one of them, you change the system. So you've got to address it in a systemic approach. You have to make plans that are beyond just the 1 year that is generally, or 2 years budget cycle that this state has been in since its inception. And we have to make sure that these plans are well executed. So I hope that you have enjoyed this opportunity as much as I have. And again, I'm Nancy Savage, and I'm asking for your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. Idalia.
Thank you. So again, my name is Idalia. I'm the only Idalia in politics in the whole state of New Mexico. I bring the diversity, the experience, because being in the legislature, it's a lot of work, but it's a big learning curve. Day one, I'm gonna hit the ground running, start introducing legislation. I've grew up in Albuquerque. I've worked with all of our indigenous community, not only the Pueblos, but the Navajo Nation, the Apache Alliance. I've worked and served for the government, not only state government, city government, county. I have phenomenal relationships with senators, representatives, commissioners, city councilors, our mayor, our governor. Experience does matter. We are a border state. We are a very unique, diverse state. And I think we need to elect diversity in the New Mexico legislature. I'm concerned with immigration. I've spent time volunteering on the border, assisting women and children with their credible fear hearings when seeking asylum in the United States. But we need to move forward. We need to push forward with New Mexico's renewable energy. We need to make sure that we fight to eliminate the high prescription drug costs, so we're not forced to choose between our medicine and our kitchen table. We got to take care of our veterans, our seniors. Let's get rid of that regressive Social Security tax that I'd be happy to sponsor day one. We need to honor our seniors, honor our commitments to them, and let's work. The work is clear and it's a lot. So today I ask for your support and your vote. I know we can't door knock, but I look forward to serving you once again. You can call me, text me anytime, because ultimately I'm going to be your servant, your public servant. And I want an open door with everyone. You can call me, text me anytime, 505-550-3868, or visit my website, idalia4nm.com. And here's my card. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin.
Great. I'm going to close and do so by giving the answer of why am I doing this? I'm at the age of potential retirement and getting involved in this. And the first is there is nobody with any healthcare background in the Senate. Debbie Armstrong is in the House. She's great, but there's not a lot else there. So to answer the question about how are we going to prepare for the future, I want to bring my expertise in public health that I developed out on the Navajo Reservation and within the VA and at the university over a number of years so that we can be prepared for the next time around. Secondly, I have already been working with the legislature for a number of years. I have written legislation, testified, and last year I helped put together this getting rid of the surprise billing bill. This year, wrote part of the bill so that the exchange plans will cost less going forward. And I can take that experience and that knowledge and the people that I know and go forward to be sure that we're going to be fine after the COVID with all the things that have to be done. Reason number two, my mom. I mentioned her a little bit earlier. My mother was a state senator in Illinois, and if any of you watch Hulu, you realize that she was elected and she fought Phyllis Schlafly person to person, 72, 73, and 74. She has been an inspiration, and I'm going to do something here. She is such an inspiration that I think it's only fair that you get a chance to see her. There she is, walking in front of the state capitol. And I will do what she said to me when I was brought up. She was an Eleanor Roosevelt acolyte. You do what lies before you to be done. And I'm asking for everyone's vote so I can do that with you and make the 20th district a wonderful district and contribution to the state of New Mexico. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Wendy.
Thank you again for having this. I've really enjoyed my time here. So when I was growing up, my mom would say to me, my mom worked at Presbyterian and retired after 27 years there. She said to me, bloom where you're planted. And my dad, who traveled around the country working as an electrical engineer, told me, not everyone who wanders is lost. The cool thing about this is that I got to learn lessons from both of my parents. I got a chance to bloom where I was planted, unlike my mom, who traveled all over the world as a military daughter. And I've been able to expand upon my knowledge and growth while I've been here in my home state by being able to tell the stories of New Mexicans for the last 27 years, working as a reporter, working for the state at the Department of Tourism, working for the county, and then also now working for a area-owned local credit union. I get to tell the stories about how people are helping people in New Mexico. And I want to tell you, it's going to take people who are tough, who are passionate, and who are kind to be able to bring our community forward from here on out. And I feel like I'm one of those people that can do that. I invite you to please take a look at my website. It's Wendy with an E, W-E-N-D-E, the number 4, burnco.com. Looking so forward to getting to know everybody a little bit better as this progresses. And I'll be asking for your vote during the general election in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie.
One day I was driving my car to Highland High School because I was working for community schools right here in New Mexico. And on my way there, a duel happened in front of my car and I was almost shot. And I drove home and I decided I'm gonna quit New Mexico. I was gonna quit the work that I was doing. And I got home and I hugged my little children. And I said, no, instead I'm gonna fight and I'm gonna run for office. Because I know that's the best place for me to bring the skills and the talents, my research abilities, and my experience to help serve my family and to serve all of your families. I give District 31 3 commitments. I am all in. Number 1, I have integrity. I am a woman of integrity, honesty, and leadership, and I know what that looks like. There's going to be 2 I's in this in, or yeah, 2 N's actually, 2 I's, yeah. Second one is innovation. I'm creative, innovative. I want to bring greater innovation, particularly in the economy, to this state. My N, I have new vision. I want to bring a new vision to this state, one that really brings people together, one that brings connection, one that brings prosperity and greater happiness for our families in this state. I will fight for the families and the women and the children of this state. I will be your champion, particularly those who are struggling, those who are in poverty, those who are facing violence, those who are facing addiction. I will be your champion, and I will fight for you, and I will fight for my family and your family. Again, my name is Julie Brenning, and I am the candidate for District 31, and I would love your vote in November and your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you candidates for putting aside this time on a beautiful Saturday afternoon to make yourselves available to your constituents, your future constituents. And for those who attended, thank you for being here. And if your question didn't get asked, or if the discussions during the forum have made you think of other questions, I can tell you from experience that all these candidates are incredibly responsive. So feel free to contact them and ask them questions and engage them however you want to, because I think they want to connect with you. So thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks again to Flora. Thanks again to Anna. And maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
You. Be well, everybody.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.